Wendy?
That was my timer. Like, it's time to go. Okay.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a spotlight on Wendy in a minute, just in a minute, but I'm going to introduce her first. Um, so this is our session on rebuilding workplace trust in the aftermath of COVID-19. You've already heard Deborah talk about trust. Trust is something I talk about a ton, and it's just one of the most foundational pieces of collaborative workplace. So really excited to have Wendy do a whole session on rebuilding trust, because even if we had a great team sometimes and had great relationships, just the uncertainty of the situation, that in itself can break down trust. So Wendy MacIntyre has been practicing HR in PEI since 2003, and she started her own consulting business, Resolve HR, in 2015. She works with small to medium-sized businesses and organizations from a variety of industries and sectors, including private and not-for-profit. And she supports her clients with training, workforce planning, and hiring, workplace investigations, and restructuring. So Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy, but you can be sort of the HR manager for hire, and people can hire you for like a day a month, or a lot of your clients are small companies maybe that can't afford a full-time HR manager, but they can have you for a day a week or day a month or whatever. So
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. You summed that up perfectly, Kirsten.
Oh, excellent. I'm good at that.
Yes, you are. The improv queen, too, I have to say. So, hi, everybody. I will bring up my presentation in a moment, but I thought I'd just, to build on what Kirsten was saying, is the volume okay? I should start with first. Is the sound okay? Okay, great. So I'm super pumped to talk to you all about trust in the workplace. I will let you know that my camera is a little bit strange in where it is compared to my monitor. So my monitor is up here and my camera is down at the bottom. So usually I'm looking at my monitor. I also have a monitor off to the side. So if you see me looking around and I might take notes along the way, it's not that I'm playing solitaire on the side, but I just kind of got my control center here. So I will be fully in, and I'll be watching the comments a little bit too, but Kirsten and Heather will be taking care of that. I'll also mention the Google Doc is still there for anybody to comment on. I was taking a few notes in there as well for instructions and things, but feel free to put in write in some things. Do you want to share questions, anything like that? So my thing is, I hate being a talking head. If we were in person, I would say my ear will pop if I talked loudly too much. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm hoping it won't happen, and I'm not using my teacher voice too much today. So with all that, as Kirsten mentioned, I work mostly with small to medium-sized businesses and not-for-profits. I do a lot of work with harassment and bullying in the workplace, including investigations, but also do training on that. It's one of my favorite areas, which sounds a little bit twisted, but I really love what I do. And a lot of times, it's talking about communication, helping managers manage people, deal with issues, just a lot of different areas around there. And it all has to do with culture and organization primarily. And I've had the good fortune of also collaborating with Kirsten in the past. So again, I'm super happy to be doing this today. So I'm going to bring up my slideshow, I think. So is that bringing it up in full? Great. So I'm loving this because I can also see my notes. So today we're going to talk about, what is workplace trust? Deborah had started to talk about it a bit, and it was a great lead in. And when we talk about harassment and bullying in the workplace and psychological harassment in the workplace, there's so much that has to do with trust and assumptions and all of those pieces. So we're going to look at what is trust and how are we dealing with it as we go back into the workplace. So some of the trends that we look at around workplace and trust include perceived lack of employee accountability that was mentioned in our last session, leadership accountability. So for leaders of groups or teams, employees, managers, employers, not only do they sometimes not trust their employees, like when we all had to start working from home, as Deborah had mentioned, well, how do we know what people are doing? How do we know they're doing the job? Well, we kind of have to trust that a little bit, but also how do our employees know that we're doing what we need to do for them? So there's accountability on both sides. And of course, between people. So coworker accountability to one another, the work, the company, the organization. There's been a lot of, so much around that, with what we've been going through and what we will continue to go through as we go through the waves that are anticipated for COVID-19. So I did a little bit of research. I Googled, and one of the websites that's out there is Google Rework. It's got some great research on there, and some of the information that they pulled up from a 2017 survey. So compared to those in the lowest quartile, people working in companies in the top quartile of trust are 76% more engaged. So if you have trust, your employees are going to be engaged. They're more productive, and they're more likely to stay. So something that I will sometimes do in my work is I will help my clients through the hiring process. I'm not a recruiter per se, but I assist them through the hiring process to sort of mitigate any risks that may come up. And right now, and it has been for the past while, there's such a labor shortage. I've got a few positions I'm trying to help clients with right now, and I just cannot get that many applicants or people that actually will suit the position that do apply. They're just so few and far between that it makes it even more important that we keep those that we want to keep employed. And there's sort of a saying that, who are the people that are likely to stay in a workplace? Those that are content and don't really want to be, they don't think that they can work elsewhere. They're going to be the ones that stay, but the ones that are your superstars, the ones that are they have really good skills, they're the ones that are going to leave, and they're the ones you have to work even harder to keep. And some of that is keeping ourselves accountable, and our employees who don't see others being held accountable. They take it to heart and they will leave. So I just wanted to highlight some of those little statistics because they're so interesting. And also when you look at the more engaged, 76% more engaged with companies that have high trust, that means discretionary effort. So people might be, doing the things that are listed in their job description and do their checklist every day. But what about the things that we don't write down? Because there's a lot of expectations, like keep an eye on our competition, what they're doing, stay abreast of what the new developments are in our industry. Those things are really hard to write down and measure, but they're things that's sort of the discretionary effort. Those are a couple of examples of that. So another example from Google's Rework research, team members with higher psychological safety, which trust is such an important component of, less likely to leave, more likely to leverage diverse ideas within their teammates. So there's more collaboration. They bring in more revenue, or they're more efficient. It could be saving money as well, especially when you're looking at a government organization or not-for-profit. And they're rated as twice effective. They're rated as effective twice as often by executives, so they get noticed. So it's taking that risk. A client of mine, he used to say to his employees, we're going to fail forward. So instead of saying, failures will fix that, or you'll learn for the next time, it was, So what? We'll get out in front of something. We'll try something different. We'll try to be innovative. If it doesn't work, we'll fail forward because we've learned that part, and now we'll build on that. So I love that phrase. So in the chat function, something that I'd like you all to do is I'd like you to type in a word to describe someone you trust. So if there's, some word that comes to mind, if you think of that person that you really trust, what are some of the words that come to mind?
Do you want us to read some of those for you, Wendy?
I would love that, because I'm looking for them, and I think the way I have my monitor set up, I can see them right now.
Loyal, respect, dependable, transparent, honest, consistent, believes in you, reliable, respect, approachable, forthcoming, kind, mentors, supports, respectful, authentic, engaged.
Respectful and authentic are really important because, it's really hard to trust someone when you don't respect them. And did someone say reliable was another word? And that is another one that's a really good one that we're actually going to talk about in a little bit. And it's all about, are people doing what they're saying they're going to do? Are they showing up when they are supposed to be showing up? Some people will say managing people, 9/10 of it is showing up, or leading people is 9/10 showing up. So that's really, really good, some really good words. Do we have some other words popping up there?
Integrity, mutual respect, caring, approachable.
Ooh, I like those. Those are great. Thank you.
Empathy is another.
Ooh, so good. Yes, empathy, figuring out how people feel. High emotional intelligence is also really important if you want to be in a really trusting relationship, especially with your coworkers.
A couple of others, competent, loyal, vulnerable.
And competency, that's a key word for my presentation today. So tuck that one away, because we're going to come back to it. There's so much good stuff, right? So now I'm going to ask you another question. What is needed to have trust in someone? I think a lot of those words, now that I'm thinking about a lot of those, you've already captured. So, what do you need to have trust in someone? You need to know those things about them. And some of the ways that we get to know those things about them, do they have those characteristics, those words that were just brought up in the chat, is that when we know that those people have those abilities or they show up in those ways, we can feel like we can trust them. And then, unfortunately, there's the other part. So what can break trust? And we'll do a little chat again, if that's okay. And I'll ask Kirsten to talk those through for me again. Sure. So what can break trust? What are some of those words?
Dishonesty, doing the opposite of what they promised to do, side conversations, betrayal, throw you under the bus, lying,
yeah,
underperforming, not loyal, unreliable, hiding information, selfishness, inaccurate, not kind, positioning, backstabbing, not communicating.
Oh my gosh. I think there's some experience of having break trust with some of our folks, maybe. And so often those are the situations that we dwell on, because those really hurt. And they're very frustrating, and it makes you feel like it's a lot of work to mistrust people and always be skeptical. So those are sort of the negative ones, are what we remember quite often. So I'm going to kind of focus us, even if we think about those phrases and those aspects of what happens when trust is broken. There's going to be some things, as we reopen, as we go back to work, as we start seeing our colleagues face to face. And there's some folks that have been essential workers. They've been going to work this whole time. So they probably feel this way towards some of the people they know. So possible mistrust issues as we're going forward. These are just a few that I was thinking about and that I've heard from people as well. You know, when you've seen others that haven't been complying with sort of the closure of things and with the health office saying stay home, and yet, you know, we saw at Easter time there were 10 cars in so-and-so's driveway and nobody was outside. We kind of tucked those things away. Like, how is it that they could do that? And how do they know they're not going to spread anything? Work ethic during lockdown. So a lot of people, you know, you wonder, what are they doing when they're at home? Why did they ask to be laid off? There's a lot of that happened as well, unfortunately. What are people getting done? I don't see them online. I don't see them. I don't do the MBWA, management by walking around. So how do I know what they're doing? What about when a workplace where the staffing had to be cut back, but not everybody got laid off. So some were laid off while others stayed on. How do people feel about that? And the pay, you know, some people getting the CERB while they're laid off, and yet some people having to go to work and making minimum wage. People not taking responsibility for their health. You know, I know that person, when we were supposed to be all holed up, that they were out and they were talking to people. They were close talkers. They were not washing their hands. They didn't really seem to care. One thing that I have heard too a little bit of, and it kind of goes back to what I was just mentioning about being laid off, and people who were receiving or are receiving, say, for example, the CERB or some other sort of other source of earnings while other people are at work, working their tails off and not making too much money. And then people start talking about it together. And it's really, comparison is the thief of joy so often. And when you talk about earnings and compensations, so often that really puts people at odds with one another. So these are all some of the issues that, you know, can impact trust as we reopen or as we continue to be open and see other people coming back to the workplace. There's all kinds of examples of those. And that's one area that when I was thinking about being in the pandemic, when we were in more or less in the lockdown, thinking about, well, when people go back to work, what are we going to be dealing with? And something that we'll notice is, as it's predicted, there's going to be waves of being in and out of sort of a lockdown. So how do we deal with that? How do we go to work and then we go home and we have to go back into all of these things, these precautions, really strict, not seeing anybody, not being around them. So it'll be challenging. Some of the enemies of trust, what I'm calling enemies of trust, some of those things are biases. So I saw people not following the health measures. And in my mind, what I might filter it through my biases. So, oh, well, it figures they're not doing it because of blah, blah, blah. I can start to see things through a lens that isn't correct. So biases, closed minds, skepticism, negative assumptions. Sometimes in the lack of information, we make assumptions and they're quite often negative. That's sort of human nature. So those are some of the things that, you know, it's good to be mindful of and to think about as far as, you know, how am I seeing this situation? How am I thinking of that person? Do any of these enemies happen to be coming up that I should be on the lookout for? So with trust, engagement, I had mentioned earlier. So trust and engagement, employees that are feeling engaged when they are comfortable bringing their personal self to work. And when I say personal self, I don't mean, you know, taking everything, all your things at home, taking them to work and unloading on all your coworkers. but instead it's not feeling like you've got your work persona, which is totally different than your home persona. So this is just, it's that buzz, almost an overused word, but your authentic self, and not feeling like you have to hide things about your personal life that because you think somebody's going to judge you at work. So that's what it means by being comfortable bringing your personal self to work. Employees are also engaged when they feel their work is meaningful. Very few people want to go to work and think, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm doing this. This doesn't make any sense. I'm just wasting my time. I dug a hole and now I'm filling it. It's not going to keep people engaged because they need to feel a purpose. And they also need to feel safe to engage. So this is the opposite of thinking, every time I open my mouth, I get shot down anyway, so I'm not going to say anything. Instead, this is, ooh, I have an idea, so I'm going to share it. And I'm going to share it with optimism and want to get input and feedback on it. So those are some of the ways that trust and engagement work together and the things that it can bring out for people. When we talk about psychological safety, I kind of love Dilbert because he's so negative, but he puts humor on it. The Dilbert cartoons. So I don't know if you can read this. I'll give you a second. And does anybody ever feel like this? I'm supposed to be, I'm told by my boss that they want me to feel safe and they want me to engage and they want me to be myself. And then I do that and I get slapped in the face, put back in the hole, and gosh, I don't know. Or I thought that was the expectation for what I was supposed to be doing at work. I thought that was what I was supposed to do. And I'm pretty sure my boss told me that last week. But now I just did it and I'm being put back down and told I wasn't supposed to do that. This happens more often than it should, of course. And there's a few parts to that is because often managers, they don't realize that they've not explicitly, clearly explained what they want done. So they don't have clear expectations set, and employees probably don't even feel safe to ask because they've been burned before. So it is really about communication, and everything is about communication, but it really is true. So making a place feel safe means ask questions, get clarification, hammer things out, get agreement on it, and hopefully that'll be getting you closer to a psychologically safe workplace or relationship and building trust with your employer. So I don't know if people had a chance to see in the email sent out by Kirsten yesterday, or yesterday or the day before, there was a worksheet that you could download, and there's two sets of questions. So if you didn't have a chance to download that, if you did and you printed it, great, whip it out. If you didn't, I'll leave these on the screen. And what I'd like you to do is to take a look at the different statements and think of it at work. I would describe myself as a person who ... So rate it from 1 as very inaccurate to 4, which is completely accurate, completely agreed with. So I'll give you just a minute for that. Got an itchy nose. What does that mean? It's supposed to mean something.
Doesn't mean someone's, I don't know, someone's walking over your grave.
Oh.
Maybe I'm mixing metaphors.
I hope so.
Kiss a fool. Soon
yeah, that's right. I heard kiss a fool.
Or you're going to have a fight with someone, says Kelly Redmond.
Gosh, that'd be after you try to kiss a fool and then they want to fight with you. Ooh. So I'm going to take a scroll down to see. And I'll say the same as what Deborah, she had great advice. If you see that, hurry up, slow down. Please feel free to indicate if I'm going too slowly, too quickly, or send it in a chat. You won't hurt my feelings because I won't see it. So Kristen will just let me know. So I'll give you just another few seconds to wrap up that questionnaire.
Wendy, I sent you a note, a private note in the chat there.
Which I can't see. I'll try. Alt.
Bring your cursor up to the top of your screen. It should pull down the option for chat, and it's in other.
It should, oh, finally came up. Now I see the kiss a fool getting a fight. I don't know. I don't like my options there. Although maybe Kirsten, after this is over, I'll give you a kiss on the cheek. You'll be my fool. Kirsten and I live at opposite ends of the street, which is pretty funny. All right. So now that you've had a few minutes to look at this, take a look at the average of the scores. And what this is indicating, and of course, this is not scientific, this is a quick and dirty, but it can kind of indicate how you look at, how you feel about your work. So, you know, how much trust do you think there is at work that you feel towards your work? We'll go to the next slide. So this is another perspective, slightly different. So it's regarding your current situation at work. So this is your whole team, or it could be thinking of your whole team, your organization, just get a project you're on. So at work, regarding our current situation, ... And this could be thinking about how the reopening is happening, how projects are being picked up again, or how new projects are happening. Could be any of those things. So I'll give you another couple minutes for you to look at that and kind of indicate what your score is. Good question, Tracy. Tracy in the chat asked, what was the average? So it all depends on, everybody's going to be a little bit different, but maybe after this one's done, I'll ask people to pop into the chat, you know, what your scores were for oh, I shouldn't have done that, sorry. I'll ask people to share if they want to share, you know, what their scores were to kind of get an idea of that. So I see a lot of people are looking at the screen again, probably finished that. So maybe what we'll do then, and I take it that you did the average of the scores as well. So let's go to the first slide. If people are willing, and you don't have to, but do people want to start popping in what their average score was? 16, 23. That's great. 16, 21, 18. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think our highest was it 23.
I think some people are putting in their total and some people are putting in their average.
That's what's going on. Okay. Like, oh, these are all over the place.
So some of those, like the 20, divide that by however many questions there are, kind of thing. So
7 questions.
yeah. So let's say it's 21 then. And then I can do quick math and say 3.
Right on. Okay, here we go. This is making more sense. Yeah. So it's not too bad, you know. An average of 3 is certainly in the top half of. Oh, wait a second, that's backwards. What I'm thinking. No, that's right.
Yep, 3 would be someone who's has a decently high level of trust.
That's great. That's really great. Good. So what about the next one? And this one, you know, what are we thinking about as we return to work, maybe as we come out of this side of the pandemic? Yeah. Okay, same score. Yeah. So the average is a little bit lower, which, you know, I anticipated. For some folks, it's a little bit lower than I think the average in the first one. And that's sort of what I've been anticipating. But there's still some really good ones too. It's more all over the place. But coming back to work, you know, regarding the current situation, and I keep those who have been continually working. I know we have a lot of people from healthcare here. So it's not to diminish your situations. It's what I've been just saying. So my apology.
So Wendy, you seem to be frozen there. I might, oh, we lost Wendy. So Wendy will probably be popping. Oh, you're back. She's back.
Back. I don't know what happened. That was weird. And I have fiber up. I'm not having rural internet, so it's so exciting today. All the different things that are happening.
Woo!
So as I was saying, am I still? Did I?
No, you're good.
Okay. It changed my view now too, because I lost my chat again. Anyway, it's all right. So, you know, coming back to the workplace, are people well informed about what's going on? I don't know. A lot of times that's a downfall. Certainly when we were.
So we've lost you again.
Or do we send people home?
Oh, you're back.
Oh my gosh.
You're with us.
I'm so tricky. I'm gonna try something here.
Would now be a good time to do your breakout, and then if there's some. Oh, look at you.
Where am I?
We see you, although you are
freeze.
frozen.
Okay, I'm going to freeze my video. Does that help any? Can you hear me?
You're frozen. You're frozen in a very, very attractive pose. Talk again. Okay, we may have lost you there. Okay. So while we're waiting for Wendy to come back, I wonder if I might send people off into the breakout rooms that she was planning. She's got a couple of questions. There were several areas of focus that she wanted to draw attention to, and I'll let her talk about what the areas of focus are when she comes back. But one, she was going to send you off into a breakout room to have some discussion. And so I'll share the two questions and then I'll set people up in the breakout rooms. So one of them is, how do we acknowledge things aren't going well? And I will, once I get you into the breakout rooms, I'll actually broadcast that into your breakout room. So how do we acknowledge things aren't going well? And then the second question is, what are appropriate ways to show concern in the workplace? So what are appropriate ways to show concern in the workplace? How do we acknowledge things aren't going well? So I'm going to send you off into some breakout rooms. If, of course, you're with a large group, then stay with your large group and don't accept the invitation. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. And just another reminder, when you see the 60-second warning, stay in the breakout rooms and finish up your conversations. So I'll broadcast those questions right into your breakout rooms, and you'll get 5 minutes.
Okay. I do not trust this technology today. My sincerest apologies. But the great thing is to have a great team that can take over for me. So you've had a chance to have a few minutes to talk about appropriate ways to show concern in the workplace and how we acknowledge how things aren't going well. These are great questions for your teams when you're working at the workplace, work teams, project teams, all those things. It's great to talk about these things in advance, so even of getting into a new project. So thank you, Tracy. If you would be able to just put in, maybe what I'll do is I'll just ask if there's a couple of people to do, if you could like say what you're thinking, what you discussed within 1 minute. So it's really short. If perhaps there's somebody that can say in the chat, they want to share what they came up with in their group. Okay.
Or maybe even wave their hand in the air, and maybe Heather can.
Okay, low morale. Provide options for. So what are appropriate ways to show concern in the workplace? The numbers, just to go back to the quiz, the numbers indicate they're just a way of looking at your average, to be honest. It's an average of your questions, your answers rather. Active listening, genuine queries, concerns, roundtable at meeting, at end of meeting, and only about how you are doing. You know what? That's a really good one. And something I've been suggesting to clients is, we'll have these meetings, especially on Zoom, we'll have check-in meetings, or using Donut is a great way to do that with remote teams all the time. But, at the end of a meeting, end with something positive. And it could be, there's a lot of talk about doing gratitudes, doing, just a check-in to really ask people, how are you doing? Like, how's that going? In meetings, when we're in person, we often have that before and after the meeting where people just kind of socialize, so we get to know one another and to feel like people care about us. So if we don't have that in person kind of hanging around, or if we do, but we're not really sure how to do things right now because of all that we've been through, it's really important to budget for that time. Like, let's do a person-to-person check-in. Just how are we as humans? It's really important to let people know that you do care and you know things about them. Ask for input, absolutely. And Kirsten's going to talk a lot about that in the collaborations session coming up after this one. So that's a really good one. Knowing what people are dealing with, we can't ask outright, what is it that is happening? How's your health? Do you have children that you're taking care of? We don't necessarily want to ask those things directly, but if we know, if it's common knowledge, if it's something that they want to talk to us about, ask them about it. It's just showing concern. And you can even say, I don't know if you're comfortable talking about this, but I wanted to know how you're doing. Like, how's your mom? I know she's got a compromised immune system, things like that. Just showing that you're concerned. And if people don't want to talk about it, that's okay too. If you have an employee assistance program, encourage people to go and use that. Okay, I have lots of time. Yay. Thanks, Kirsten. So that's great. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on that. And I'm actually going to go back because, let me see. Where this comes from is when we look at, there's an idea of, no, I'm going to go back even further. Close your eyes while I skip along. It ties into what we were just talking about and what you had in your discussion. So trust is the willingness to be vulnerable to one another. It's because you believe there will be a positive outcome. Nobody's going to try or give discretionary effort or share information or try to know you as a person if they don't feel like there's a positive outcome going to happen. And because you believe that the other person accepts you for who you are and cares about you as a person. And that's how, when you have these communications, you talk about, how people are doing at home, how they're doing working virtually, how they've been doing with having things locked down for a while, all of those things, we share them because we think that people actually do care about us. We don't trust them. We don't want to be part of that.
Wendy, do you think your screen is up?
I do.
Okay. You're not sharing your screen at this moment.
Goodness.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, that was just not important anyway. To do. So when we think about trust too, I wanted to kind of put it in this perspective, can it be a skill, a talent, a muscle, a competency? Is it something that we just do naturally? Not always. And I think coming back to work after having been staying home and not trusting where people's hands have been or talking to you close or giving a hug or knowing what we should and shouldn't be doing, we have to now practice trust, behaving in trustful ways and giving trust to others. So in my mind, it is a competency. And somebody had mentioned that word earlier and I thought, oh yeah, that's bang on. And I chose this picture, and I've had a couple of pictures of it already, but it's an old bridge that was in the Bonshaw Park before they had a safe one. And to me, I always thought going across it, oh my gosh, is this going to last? So this is the underbelly. And it's sort of like that with trust. What's underneath it? So we're going to break it apart into a few different pieces. And here's where the little breakout session that you did falls into place. So when we talk about, there's this model of trust competencies. There's different areas of it. In some places we might be really good at, and some places we may not be. So if we can tease it apart, we can look at it in this way. So here there's 6 components, and it could be the 5 even that lead to psychological safety, but really there's 6 components. So we're going to go through those. And strategic competence. So strategic competence is about decision making. Do people have the whole picture in mind? There's, innovation is part of that. Risk taking, again, it's failing forward. So to know that we're going to make some mistakes. That's what innovation is about. We're going to make some mistakes and we're going to learn from them. Not being strategically competent would be, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. So strategic competence, team learning, and it supports the organization's success or the team's success, because the people in the organization have the skills and ability to do the work. So it's also about being clear and knowing what people are supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be doing, or what all those components are in strategic thinking, strategic doing. For example, you might trust a surgeon to operate on you, but not cut your hair. Somebody can be very competent in one area, but not in another. Integrity and openness, and this one too. When we think about it, it's about being open-minded. So instead of having blinders on to look at just the negative or just these negative assumptions, or doing just this and we're not going to change anything about the way we're doing it, it's to be open, being broad, thinking, okay, there's other opportunities, there's other issues, there's other things that may be going on that we don't know. Doing the right thing, not doing the thing right, but doing the right thing, and sharing credit, not just saying, the team did this, but I did it and I led it and blah, blah, blah. It's sharing and having that integrity. And the one that we kind of got ahead of ourselves on, but necessity dictated that one. So spirit of unity. It's about feeling like we belong. Who doesn't want to feel like they belong to something? That's what being human is about. It's about caring. People had mentioned that one in the chat. Being committed. So, doing what you said you do and being committed to the team, not just being self-interested all the time, and looking for a positive environment. So if we all think about being in a team, we have common goals. It ties into the definition of trust in that it's the willingness to be vulnerable to others. And also know that that's the tide that's going to raise all boats. We're in it together. We'll be vulnerable, but it's for the betterment of the entire team, and we can do that together. One of the best ways to find out about people is to share something about yourself, and then they will share something too. So it's sort of that spirit of unity that you could think about for that one. So, and this is where the breakout would have happened, and you guys did it so well without even having the first slide before it. So yeah, how do we know when things aren't going well? How do we acknowledge things aren't going well? And that's really important when you think about a project that may not be going well. There's a lot of people, they won't talk about it. They won't talk about it because they don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. They don't feel comfortable with conflict, so they avoid it. And that's where you start seeing good money thrown after bad. We keep going down a path and we're not calling anybody out on it, but we're grumbling about it, and we're undermining the team, undermining potentially good outcomes, all of those things. So it's really important that we stay thinking about the goal and being able to acknowledge when things aren't going well. Predictability and reliability. So here we're talking about fulfilling commitments. So do what you say and say what you do. Communicating expectations. This is a huge part, when you think about a new person starting a new job, one of the things that quite often happens when they fail is because we haven't communicated expectations with them. Or I do a lot of work with startups and they don't know what they expect. They just figure out as things happen, that's not what I expected. I'm going to have to fire them. I can't stand them. Well, did you tell them what you wanted? Did you know what you wanted? So those are some really key parts to the communication. And expressing expectations isn't about being rigid or about being overly bossy. What it is it's telling people the rules of the game. And it's pretty hard to play a game if they don't know the rules. All they know is that wasn't right. You'll eventually have people just turtle and not want to do any part of that. So I'm going to do another little breakout session, and it's going to be on predictability and reliability. So the questions are, how do we know we've communicated expectations clearly? And how do we communicate clearly if we're not face-to-face? So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to do that. And then at the end, no, I'm going to give you about 4 minutes. I'll give you 4 minutes. It's a big question, but we'll see how we do. And then at the end, just to have some comments come back to the group would be great from a few people. And I'd love it actually if somebody would talk so that I could see you. And again, so my ear doesn't pop. So if you can kind of think about what are some key points you could bring back to the group, I'd love to hear it. So I'll let you break out into sessions. I'll let Kristen and Heather take care of that technical part.
And I'm sending people back to the exact same breakout rooms, so you don't have to introduce yourselves all over again. So you have been, oh, you might have an extra person or two because we've had some new people join. So okay.
Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. That's good.
Actual project. And then how do you communicate clearly if you're not face-to-face? Elizabeth mentioned like texting, emails, different methods, because everyone receives information differently. So making sure you're hitting all the different methods on how they receive information. Samantha said that repetitive is good for her, like to talk something through and understand it and clearly discuss it and then kind of repeating it, and then she's good to go. She's got it, but not just to say, hey, this is what you need to do, bye. That's not helpful for some people, depending on how they do projects. And then using different features of technology like chatting or connecting or having some fun on group calls or chat messages, like just to make sure people know that you guys are together and you're there, that you're not alone, that you're working in a team, and that it's okay if you're by yourself, but you're not by yourself when you're doing your work.
Yeah. So quite often we know, like when you said, disengage, when you figure out that people aren't understanding what you're saying or you're not communicating clearly. When people disengage, they a lot of times we don't ask questions because we think, oh, everybody knows that, I just don't understand it, or you might even get defensive and think they didn't explain it at all well, so if they can't do that, then I'm not going to engage. So there's all kinds of different ways that can show up, and it can be hard. Sometimes we have to pull that out of people to get them as part of it. Oh my gosh, Heather, that's really cute. That. This is the great thing about Zoom and working virtually. So those are really good, Tanya, and your group. Well done. You covered it so well that I think I'm going to move on to the next one. So, and psychological safety is another component, another competency involved in, trust. And I won't spend a whole lot of time on this because, the morning session was a lot on this. And this is why we have legislation, is to encourage this psychological safety in the workplace. And also there's the CSA standards. There's a whole guide on this, and it's amazing and it's huge and it's so much, but it just needs baby steps. So, let it be safe to be vulnerable. And as I had mentioned, the way that people can really get information out of other people in a kind way is to share. Be vulnerable. Now that doesn't mean, be vulnerable to the part where you look incompetent, but it does mean to be human with people. Take interpersonal risks to learn. So share something, people will share back. And that's really what leaders can be so good at. And it's a competency because you have to know what is appropriate to be vulnerable about and what isn't. Yes. Some of the questions that you can use with your teams is, how can we reward team members for asking challenging questions? And so often that can be, we just, we ask more questions. We thank them for bringing that up. I often will tell groups when I do workshops, you know, for meetings, share around who's identified as the devil's advocate. You know, identify, okay, in this meeting with all of us, I'm going to appoint Carly to be the devil's advocate. So whether she agrees with everything that's being said or not, I want her to ask all these questions, to poke holes in it all. And that way, if somebody has that role, they can ask the questions and they feel safe, and it can start to normalize it over time.
Love that.
Isn't that good?
Love it.
That for years, yeah.
Yep.
And how is a team member coached after admitting the mistake? Again, you reassure them. You say, "Thank you for thinking of that. I hadn't, you know, I'm glad that you recognize that that was a mistake. It's good that you're sharing this, because now we're going to figure out how to make it better. We're going to figure out how to make it so it doesn't happen again. And what have we learned from that?" So often we want to hide our shame, like, oh, I made a mistake. I don't want to talk about it. It's too embarrassing. But it's really a best practice and a human thing to do is to talk to people about it after they've made a mistake. And sometimes you can go through what if thinking, or you could use catastrophizing as a strategy. Okay, well, if this mistake was made, what's the worst possible thing that can happen from it? And if you start to say, well, nobody died, nobody's harmed, we didn't go bankrupt, whatever it may be. So you can start to figure out, okay, it's not the worst thing in the world. So let's talk about this mistake in context and how we can move forward from that. Collaborative intent. So this is where, sorry, I'm just looking at my thing to see where I'm at. Oh, part of it's hiding. That's what's going on. Collaborative intent is, you know, what is it that we want to be working towards? And as was mentioned in Deborah's session, it's being open to different points of views, but also being supporting one another and thinking about things, being innovative, building on one another. And, you know, it's not always, I like how it says it's collaborative intent, because not always is it appropriate to do things collaboratively. There's different styles, which Kirsten's going to talk about, you know, and how to deal with things. And collaboration is so useful, but sometimes we just, it's not an issue that needs, like if the house is on fire, you're not going to say, okay, let's collaborate on how to deal with this fire. We're going to say, get out right now, right? And somebody can say that and you got to go. Same with, you know, shutting down the province. It wasn't something we needed to chit chat about, which I shouldn't say it dismissively. It wasn't something we needed to collaborate about. It was something that needed to be to happen. It needed to be decisive, and it was a go. But whenever we can do things collaboratively, we get so much more buy-in, so much more innovation, so many more ideas, so much more foolproof ideas, that it is definitely worth doing it. And I've got 5 minutes left. And here I will perhaps ask for some volunteers, just maybe 2 volunteers to, in a minute, tell us, you know, is there anything that you're thinking of when it comes to workplace trust or these competencies that sticks out or doesn't resonate at all for you, in how trust can be a competence for the workplace? And if there's some ways that I don't expect people to, you know, share what did I discover about myself, but maybe how can you apply it to the workplace? So again, we'll look for people to either go in the chat, or I really love seeing people talk. So if you can flag us down to let people know about what your thoughts are there, that'd be great. Thanks, Debbie. The devil's advocate angle it's so useful when somebody's assigned for that. So anybody want to share their thoughts on other parts of trust that you think should be a competency that weren't listed? It's
Not seeing any hands raising. Anybody willing to share some reflections on what Wendy's asking or talking about?
So Deborah put in, once trust is broken, you have to work doubly hard to rebuild it. And it's so true. You know, the saying, once bitten, twice shy. There's a reason that's a saying, because there's a theory about people have, you want to, if you don't know somebody, or if you know somebody, I guess it should be, if you know somebody, you want to believe them. If you don't have any other reasons for mistrusting people, if it hasn't been broken in the past, then you assume the positive quite often, or you assume that somebody's telling you the truth. But if that's broken, it's really hard. So yeah, how are people finding trust needing to be rebuilt due to COVID?
Yeah, I'm seeing someone, Valerie post, the trust issue is highlighted by COVID. So it's maybe putting it into sharp relief if the trust wasn't there.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Number of comments. People have different approaches to trust. I either inherently trust people unless the trust is broken, or I inherently don't trust people and trust must be earned. I suspect that in some ways is connected to personality type, but it can also be connected to your past experience, right?
And stages in life.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe when you were younger, you believe you trusted everybody and you feel a bit more jaded over time, or in cross section in time, like coming back from COVID, maybe there is less trust. Yeah.
Sorry, you can see the chat. Can you, Wendy?
I can now. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great.
So, one just moved along. Trust is developed over time. So how can we accelerate the development of trust when we don't have time? Yeah, that's a great question. And really it's about consistency over time. And when we talk about those competencies, if you look at predictability and reliability, so just coming back again and again, showing up, being there, it takes a long time. But over time it will come around. And then there's some people that just won't ever feel trust, maybe. And that's very unfortunate, but you can't change people either. But as long as you're doing your side of it and don't get dejected early on, but keep going, it's that predictability. Yeah.
One of the things that I often talk about in terms of mediation, when I'm mediating, it's because trust has broken down so dramatically that people are villainizing each other. And what I say is, that's not an overnight thing. That has taken that length of time to build to that place of villainization. So it takes time, as people have been commenting, to rebuild it. And as you say, Wendy, what it takes to rebuild it is, I think, agreeing on how you move forward together, and then notice each other following through on that agreement.
Yeah. And it's talking about it.
Being deliberate.
Yeah. And meet with people once a week. Have a team meeting, even if you're virtual, a team meeting once a week. Have check-ins daily if you want to. Yeah.
So we're at 2:30. Any final comments before for a wrap up, Wendy?
It's a topic I love, and psychological safety is so great. And, one of the silver linings I think that's coming out of COVID, and I've been looking for them and finding lots of them, is that we're having these discussions. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about communication. It's so amazing to see that we're having these conversations. So keep up all the good work, everybody, and keep showing up. And thank you, everybody, for your engagement.
Thank you, Wendy. That trust is a big topic for me as well. So I'm not going to say that I'm going to cover more of that in the next session, but I'll definitely build on what you've started, what you and Deborah and Stephen have started. So we're going to take our break now. We'll start again in 15, 2:45.